emotional process for sure. So that's why we wanted to talk about writing process, and our exciting speakers will be sharing their experiences on writing, especially aiming early career researchers. And this event is a part of a set of events actually organized by @Gender, aiming to provide a safe space for early career researchers and sort of like give practical information as well. Before this event, we had some meetings on being an early career researcher during the pandemic. We had one on publishing your first book in a gender series, and this is the third one, and we'll be having other meetings as well. So before giving the floor to our speakers, I would like to say a few words on @Gender. As you might already know, @Gender is an European association for gender research, education, and documentation. It's basically a broad association for academics, practitioners. It's always a very hard word for me. Activists and institutions working in the field of gender studies. We do quite a lot of things. Actually, we organize conferences each year. A European Feminist Research conference is organized by us every 3 years, and a spring conference each year. Last year's conference was online for obvious reasons. And you can find the recordings of that conference on YouTube. So you can follow our social media accounts for these upcoming conferences. And in addition to organizing conferences, we also publish a book series called @Gender, Teaching with Gender. We do this in cooperation with Routledge. A really exciting new book is coming by, edited by Angelike here and other editors as well. And lastly, I can say that actually to hear more news from us, you can subscribe to our email list. I'll send the link in a minute for the email lists. And you can be a member of @Gender. I'll also share the information on how you can be a member. You can both be an individual member or an institutional member. So I'll share the related information. But that's everything I want to say for now. So I'll give the floor to Charlene to introduce our speakers for today.
Yes, thank you, Demet. Hello to everyone. And thanks again to Berteke and Maria. I will just present the both of you. So Berteke is a professor of history and gender studies, and she holds the chair language and culture studies at the Faculty of Humanities at Utrecht University. And she's also part of the Graduate Center program. Her research is focused on gender, culture, and citizenship. And she publishes on history and gender of social work in the Netherlands and in Europe, on colonial culture and citizenship, on history of Dutch women's movement, and on gender, history, and philosophy of the humanities. And also, last but not least, I mean, she's the founder of @Gender Association. So we're very happy to have you here. And also she has an outstanding publishing record in many international journals. So she will help us. Her advice will be a great advices for ECR. And so thank you again for accepting our invitation. So Maria Tamboukou is Professor of Feminist Studies at the University of East London. And more precisely at the Department of Social Sciences and Social Work. And so Maria's research focuses on philosophies and epistemologies in the social sciences, feminist theories, narrative analytics, and archival research. So she has authored several monographs, co-authored several books, and co-edited volumes on research methods, and a lot of articles and book chapters. She would also history. I mean, she has been interested in writing histories of the present, which is a central focus of her work, and also on an assemblage of feminist genealogies. And thanks a lot, Maria, for accepting our invitation. I give the floor to you, Berteke.
Thank you, Charlene and Demet and Agliki for organizing this. We will both speak, but before we speak, you will write. We invite you to write 2 sentences before we present our thoughts and experiences with writing. We invite you to write down 2 sentences, not to share them yet, so keep them to yourself. Don't post them in the chat. That will come later after you've listened to us. But the sentences are quite simple. One is, what is your most what do you remember about the most difficult moment when you were writing something? The second question is more positive. What is your most rewarding memory of writing something? These instructions are now in the chat. Write 2 sentences. Don't make it a big thing, but just go back to fond memories and to moments of despair, maybe, or anxiety. We will give you 2 minutes to do this, and then Maria will start talking, and then we'll take it from there. Thank you for doing this.
Okay, so while we wait for participants to write these sentences, I will try to share some visuals.
Please don't share yet. We will start reading and discussing it later.
I can't see Maria anymore.
Yeah, she's entering the room now.
Okay, I'm back. I had to go out because Zoom wanted access to my presentation. So I'll try to share now. Okay.
Perfect.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right then. So is it time to start?
Yes, I think it is.
Okay, first of all, I'm so glad to be here today at the Art Gender event because it brought back some very fond memories, and this goes back to 2009 when I was at the conference in Utrecht where Art Gender was founded. And I remember Berteke sitting with Iris at the podium and saying, and now you can have this little thing that says that you are an Art Gender founder member. So while I was thinking about what I will be talking about today, I found this little thing, Berteke, and I remember the lovely times we had back then, 11 years ago. So as you, this is the image of the little thing. So while I was thinking about the things that I wanted to share with you today, the first thing that came into my mind is, of course, the famous a woman's job is never done. And I thought of paraphrasing it into a writer's job is never done. And why I think this. When I need to think about writing, I don't think writing is something that we can separate it from other things that we do. And so my idea was that the first thing that I want to say about writing is that I see writing as an assemblage, as an entanglement of many different practices. And these practices include reading. When we read, we all know that we write at the same time. As a matter of fact, I have some images of my books. You can see here where I write in the margins, I write in the last page of the book. So for me, reading and writing are inseparable. But there are other things about writing. Writing is about thinking, of course, about creating, about citing other people's thoughts, about revising. Writing is so much about struggling, and it's no surprise that Berteke asked you to think about the worst moment of this struggle. But also, writing is about remembering, imagining, understanding, reflecting, despairing, editing. And I want to say, of course, writing is also about enjoying. So that's how, when I think about writing, that's how I think about it, as an assemblage of all these different practices that never happen separately, but are always entangled and complex. And as we move on with our lives, because writing is also very much about the materiality of the spaces where we write, of the things we write with. So as we go on with our lives, we go on with writing. And if we think about writing in this very complex and entangled and new materialist way, then I think we can start, destroying the taboo around writing, destroying the idea that there is a moment of writing which is separate from other moments in our lives. And just to give you the first thing that comes into my mind when I think about writing, I also think about all these wonderful feminist authors like Audre Lorde or the Brontes, who have inspired us while we grew up as feminists, and we read about their work, and we started imagining that we could write like them. And I would call this the multiple beginnings of writings. But thinking about writing as a more concrete practice of the early career researcher who only some years ago was also a PhD student. Here is another image of my research diary. You see, the day starts in June 1992, when I was going to my supervisor's room with sometimes silly thoughts thrown into my research diary. But I do think that's one of the multiple beginnings of writings. I think that I started writing then. And as a matter of fact, some of the ideas that I had as early as in 1992 ended up becoming titles of papers or titles of books. I remember we had a writing workshop on how to write the thesis, and one of the exercises they asked us to do back then was write the first sentence of your PhD. So that was the exercise that the workshop started with. And I remember I sat down, I thought for two minutes, like perhaps some of you did today. And I wrote down, last night I dreamt I was at Girton College. Girton College was one of the universities of my PhDs. And of course, I was reading Daphne du Maurier, and I loved Rebecca, both the novel and the film. And all these things came into my mind, and that was my first sentence for my PhD. Last time I dreamt I was at Girton College. Of course, this in the end did not become the beginning of my PhD, but it did become the first sentence of a paper that I wrote even before I finished my PhD. It was published in Gender and Education. I remember it was about women teachers' spatial practices. And the first sentence of it was, last time I dreamt I was at Girton College. So what I wanted to say is that you never know when you write a sentence, when you write a thought, when you prepare your diary for your supervisor, you never know what will be the multiple beginnings of your writing process, what it is that you write now, and then will use it to write later on. So one of the first advice I always give to my PhD students or to colleagues when we do writing workshops is keep everything that you write. Don't delete or say that anything might not be worth it, because you never know when the moment comes and you will be able to use it again. And although there are multiple beginnings in the way we write, I also think that we never write in a linear process, beginning from something and ending to something. Writing always happens in the middle, in the intermezzo, as Deleuze and Guattari have written. And when they were writing about this, writing in the middle, writing in the intermezzo, they were thinking about Virginia Woolf's novels. If you read The Waves, for example, you see what I mean here. There are no beginnings or endings in the thoughts, in the way Virginia Woolf writes. And for many feminist researchers, because I guess this is a writing workshop particularly addressed to feminist and gender studies researchers, writing always happens in this middle, in this rhythm of the waves. And these are the moments when the inspirations and the ideas come. And you should hold them, all these ideas, you should treasure them, you should keep them, you should archive them. You know that I'm crazy about archives. And who knows when the moment comes, when these middles, these multiple beginnings, these initial thoughts, they will eventually become the abstract of a paper, and later on the argument of the book chapter, or even the central argument of your PhD. Because as Julia Kristeva has beautifully put it in this important notion of intertextuality, we are always dispersed among texts. We are emerging from texts. We are giving back to text we are taking from them. So it is this, our entanglement in the different texts that we read and write and think about and cite and quote all the time, that our own writing will emerge. And it will emerge at a moment when you never expect it. So it's never something that you wake up one day and you say, I know what I want to write, and you will go in front of your computer and start writing. I have never done this. I know a woman philosopher who was doing that. That was Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt had this incredible ability of having everything in her mind. And then she was saying that when she was sitting in front of her typewriter, then she was just dictating her thoughts. We are not Hannah Arendt. Don't expect this ever to happen. Our writing moment will emerge at moments that we would never expect them. And all we can do at the time is follow the ebb and flow of these thoughts, of these writings, of these waves, like Virginia Woolf did, and start creating our own thoughts, our own paper, our own abstract, our own thesis, our own book. And of course, this is a big challenge for all feminist researchers today. Although we are all entangled in intertextuality, we should also be very critical about what texts are these that we are citing from. We should think about all these readings, books, archival documents of Black women and women of color that we have never read. We should start challenging ourselves. Why have I started thinking about Virginia Woolf? She was great, yes, I know, but there were so many more great women. Have we read about them? Have we engaged with their writings? How can we start this, what I thought about when preparing these thoughts in my mind, this post-colonial dialogic imagination. So it's not just intertextuality, as Kristeva or Bakhtin have put it, it's how we can decolonize this intertextuality. And this is very important for all of us. I always struggle, perhaps more these days than in the past, with challenging myself. Who are the authors that you are citing? Who are the authors that you are engaging with? And although this is an ongoing struggle, I cannot not mention the pleasures of writing. And I'm so glad again, and I promise you we had never agreed on this with Berteke, that the second question that Berteke has asked you to consider is this best moment. Because you know what I mean, when the moment comes and you know what you're going to write and you are finishing the chapter or the paper, this is one of the best moments, perhaps because it is a creative moment. And in a way, we are able to see what it is that we have written. And here, one practical advice that I would give to all writers, particularly so early career writers, is that because writing has so much struggle and pain and despair, sometimes we finish something and we have not realized its beauty. So my advice is, when you're struggling a lot on writing, and you have reached a point where you feel you can't contribute more, leave your writing, take a break, separate it with it for some time. And then when you go back to it, you will you will just be reading your work and you will say, oh, did I write that? Well, I'm good. So I think that you will agree with me that when we leave something that we have written for some time, and then we can go back to it, first of all, we can see the things that we couldn't see because we were struggling so hard. But also we might see gaps or omissions, or ideas may come back to ourselves, because by leaving this space between writing and reading or thinking, we allow time to take its role in what it is that we are writing. Because writings, of course, writings have specialities. Look at my desk, how messy it is when I write. But also writings have temporalities. And we are in a time when more and more feminist researchers, like Isabel Stengers, for example, talk about slow science, about the importance of allowing the rhythm of life to take its precedence. So it's always, when we think about how we write and what we write, it's always important to think about spatiality and temporality in their interrelation. And here I have a moment from a wonderful experience I had some 11 years ago. At the time, a group of wonderful women from Narrative Network Australia had invited me to go to Australia, and I was, giving different talks as you do, and workshops, and talking with PhD students. And the end of this experience was a writing retreat. So this wonderful woman, Ruth Ballardi, who is now a lecturer at Greenwich, and it was the year that she was actually finishing her PhD. She rented a beautiful house in Cairns with the money they had got from the Australian Association of Humanities. So she got this grant and she organized this writing retreat. And we went there. You can see us, 6 women. We were doing different things. Joe Messinga was a social worker, is a social worker, but also a yoga teacher. So every day we will wake up, we will do yoga exercises, and then we will retreat in our rooms and start writing. And in the end, at the end of this writing retreat week, there were so many different things that came out from this workshop. Ruth and Roche both finished their PhDs and published papers just a year after. Elaine, who was going through a rough time in her life, had this idea of writing a book about women facing breast cancer, and she's now almost ready to publish it. I wrote one of my best papers, I feel, around Rosa Luxemburg and Hannah Arendt, and Joe wrote the first paper, which later became the central core of her PhD. So many things happened just in the space-time of 1 week, just out of a group of women who would do yoga in the morning, write till the afternoon, then go for a walk, and then start cooking and drinking. And in the end of the day, we would sit around in a veranda and exchange ideas about what was the work of our day. So that was, I totally recommend these workshops, these writing retreats, exercises, particularly if you are at a critical moment when you have to finish something or to complete something, whether this is a PhD or an article or a book chapter or anything at all. So in this sense, for me, writing, of course, is the creation of academic thoughts and ideas, but I see writing as an inscription of our feelings, an inscription of our thoughts, an inscription of our affects and emotions. But I also see writing as illustration. When we write, we present things that we want them to be clear, and we want other people to understand what it is that we are writing about, and how they can follow our thoughts. And of course, finally, and I think I have given you many different examples of this, I see writing as an assemblage of technologies. And I have written in the past a lot about technologies, and when I talk about technologies, I don't just mean computers or typewriters or other things of, technological instrument, but I also think about technologies of disciplining ourselves, of being with others, technologies of sharing, technologies of existing. And I will leave it here, and then we can come back to the question and time for more. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Maria. Oh, I'm mute, I think.
No, it's fine.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you better.
Okay.
And thank you very much, Maria, for the talk. And now, Berteke, if you want, you can have the floor.
Well, I guess everyone feels with me that I just am so impressed with the presentation of Maria, who brings out all those difficult and exciting and connected elements of writing that I think we already have enough to work with, but I'll say a few more things, and then we open it for questions and answers and exchanging stuff. In a way, we can see this moment together of 1.5 hours of together as a mini writing retreat. You have all written 2 sentences already. That is sometimes more than I'm achieve in an hour or in 2 hours. So that's the beginning. What I was thinking about writing in the face of the beginning of your career. I didn't experience those years as my early career. I didn't know there would be a later career. So one of the elements of writing your PhD and right after your PhD is that you don't know what the future will be. You are writing and you might think this is the last time I write something academic and I will have to take a job to pay the rent and never return to academia. That feeling I quite remember, although I'm of an age that people think that jobs were easy. In my time, they were not. So there were years that I wrote my PhD, I enjoyed it, I found it difficult, I found it exciting, but I didn't know where it was all leading to. And that is one of the things that I remember from writing, is that you have this constant struggle of keeping those thoughts away to really focus on the present. Now I'm here. Now I have a moment to write. It might be the last moment, but I enjoy it, and it might turn into something that I could use later in my life. That might be an element in them hiring me or them publishing me. So what I was thinking of, the tricks that I tried to to apply to keep myself to writing and not stop. And so I thought I'll share some of the things. Somebody once said to me, the trick is to become addicted to writing, that you really do not feel well when you didn't write something. So, and then I thought, well, I never liked coffee when I was a teenager, but I'm quite addicted to it. So it is possible to get addicted to something that you once thought is terrible and difficult. So I think I managed to get there. One of the things was try to write something every day. At a certain moment, I changed it to 6 days a week. But whatever your life is, whatever is happening, try to write 15 minutes. And when the day is yours, write 8 hours or do some. But try to make it such a natural part of your life that that you have to enjoy it because you're doing it. So that rhythm sometimes helps me. So I feel better when I take my favorite writing block that's a bit old-fashioned like this, and my favorite pen. I have an expensive and a cheap one, but both write perfectly. So try to get to that, and at the moment that you write, try to pay all the love and respect to the paper and your thoughts that they deserve. The awareness that you can never write if not others have written before you, and that what you will write will be read by others and will return to you in the most strange forms. People quote you and you think, have I argued that? Yes, when I think close. So be a bit modest about your role between authors who came before you and who come after you. But you are part of that chain. And I think, and I really agree with Maria's point about, think about what authors you want to follow, who you quote, whose footsteps are inspiring to you. Be totally aware of authors that you don't know and that you are part of the injustice when you don't quote them. Try to change that. Try to think, where could I make a small difference? Don't feel that you have to do justice to all forgotten authors throughout history. That is too much. But take your field, take a point and think, I will make sure that this author will never be forgotten. He inspired me, and I will make sure that somebody else is inspired also by them. But make it doable. Just like writing is, start with a sentence. Don't start with a book. So modest projects really help in getting used and even addicted to writing. One of the practices that I also found very helpful and still find helpful is that sometimes you treat yourself to writing text that you promise no one will ever read. Don't spend years on it. That would be a waste of time. I'm practical like that. But try to think, how would I write if it is only for me? And for me, that is a way of connecting to what I really like, and to also become aware of where do I modify my writing to what is expected, what I think my readers, what I think the publisher, what are the buzzwords that I have to use, that kind of thing. You have to deal with all of this if you want to get published, if you want your paper proposal to be accepted, if you want your book proposal to be taken into consideration. You have to write not only for yourself. You will have to think about what context you are in, but treat yourself to some private writing so that you can feel the connection of how much fun it is just to make a sentence. I also could really relate to Maria's point of be surprised. You're writing, the moment you use a word, you suddenly realize, oh, the word has two meanings. Or a metaphor that takes you away. You want to explain something. You think, oh, the reader might not understand what non-linear time would be, and then you give an example, and suddenly the example, the metaphor has its own life, and you start exploring that, and you have suddenly a section or a paragraph in your paper. So let the words take you away, if that is possible. One of the strategies that I also advise would be to have different writing projects, because the feeling of the immense responsibility, I'm writing, I'm in that chain, I want to do justice to unheard voices, is that's an incredible pressure. And if that all has to happen in one text, it's too much. So try to find parallel writing things. When you write an article, in the back of your mind, think about a review that you also have promised to a journal. Or when you write a grant application, a specific form of writing that really brings out all the anxiety that we have described, treat yourself to also writing a blog in a friendly, safe context where you can enjoy your topic and share the pleasures of your topic, your research questions. And then the advice of to write and let it rest for a moment. You can also turn to some other writing. Oh, let's do this. Let's write to my advisor, telling them how I moved beyond what they ever advised me, for example, or write a letter, write a course introduction if you are hired to do a course. That's all is writing, and it takes a bit away that holy atmosphere of that this sentence that you're now writing has to perform everything, and that reduces a little bit of the load on your own shoulders, and you can think, okay, the real deep things I will keep for the application. Now I will just write something that is accessible, it's fun, something, play with your own affects, both the ones that are related to anxiety and fear and uncertainty about the future, and the affect of love, pleasure, enjoying, celebration. It has been said, and I say it again, it is a privilege that we may write. Even if we are in the poorest situation and we have no job prospects and we are uncertain about the future, writing is a glorious thing. And even if you can only find one day a week to spend on writing, feel that it is a privilege and others might profit from it. So yes, privilege, it doesn't come to everyone, and you might hope to end up in academia to share this privilege and to help more people to the privilege of reading, writing, and being read. It's not, yeah, and I was hesitant. Should I add that this is that writing is a privilege, because it can increase our anxiety. You think, oh, I'm so privileged and still I'm not performing. That kind of feeling. But yes, why not enjoy a privilege and be aware of what work others have done, what exclusion, exploitation are the basis of the way we run the world, and that brings us in a certain position that we can afford this, or we can afford this for part of our lives. Thinking about that side of writing is helpful for me. Maria started, so you will maybe think that we agreed beforehand what we would be saying, but it was only a few minutes ago that we exchanged what we would be saying. So Maria saying a writer's work is never done, like the housewife who will keep on working in her home. I have a marriage metaphor that's also a bit limited. So you probably know the expression something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. You know, it's an expression that I think it's British. Maria will know what a bride should wear on her wedding. There should be at least one blue sock, and there should be a new dress and an old underskirt, and something should not be her. It's a gendered marriage image. So something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, and I translate that into writing. Something old, be aware, work with what others have written. Do a nice politics of quotation. And also do your own work and use your own old work. You have written papers in the past, transform them into articles. You have written stuff that did not make it into your PhD, make it into the beginning of a research proposal. So work with the old that you have, your own old and old of others. Something new, write applications, write paper proposals, write book proposals. It is the life of an early career person. And believe me, I'm no longer early career, but it never stops. You will also always have to write applications, so you'd better get to like it a little bit. That will make an enormous difference. So also write new things, borrow from others, quote the authors who you think deserve to be quoted, and write reviews and translations, and think of ways that you can expand your writing scale and publication scale by writing the introduction to a translation of a theoretical text in a language that you grew up in and the rest of the world doesn't know. Write reviews of books that are forgotten, claim with a journal, this book is old, but it still requires a review and I can do it. So do things with what others have done. And something blue is use your pen and paper. Don't leave everything to the computer. The only way that you can write and be absolutely sure that no one else will read it is on paper. Your computer will probably be hacked. And so then you can always have to fear that somebody might write it now. But try to enjoy the physical pleasure of holding a pen, feeling your hand move over the paper and making a mess of your desk. These are the things that helped me a little bit in my early career. I want to leave it at here. And I think that now is the moment that you may all, or maybe you did return when you listened to Maria and me, to the sentences that you wrote at the beginning, the moments where you were happy about writing and the moments where you think it's difficult and challenging. We are an awful lot of people. Maria, what do you think? Shall we ask everyone to post the 2 sentences, or will that be then a breakdown of the Zoom session? Maybe Charlene may join.
Well, thank you so much, Berteke. I really loved it. And as you were talking, I was looking at my pencils. I have many pencils on my desk, and they all come from different museums, places I have visited, films I have seen. So that's my physicality with writing. I totally agree with you. So I think perhaps the organizers should decide on whether, people, if you want to have breakout rooms, or, it's up to the organizers, I guess.
Well, let me first say thank you very much, both of you. These were really, really inspiring talks. I mean, for myself, at least I can say my mood is really up now, because thinking about writing or actually doing the work of writing as an early career researcher is always, entangled with being unemployed, doing all these applications and having the pressure of, I should publish here and there, so I will be employable. And then you stop thinking about what you want to do, what you want to write, and start thinking about more like how I will be more employable, which is horrible. So it was, in that sense, great to hear these presentations. I'll definitely think about what I want to do with writing, what I want to do with my research in a different perspective after your talks. Well, I'll actually give the floor again to you. I think everyone can share what they how they answer to these questions, because now that everyone has an answer, I guess. So you can, quickly look to the answers. I'm sure there'll be some patterns, if it's okay for you.
Okay.
So in that case, I invite everyone to share their answers to these beautiful questions that we put in the beginning.
Okay. Now,
there was a nice comment in the beginning about multiple endings or know how to end. That I totally agree. That sometimes we have actually finished writing and we have not even realized it. And somebody needs to tell us, yeah, you're done, girl, or you're done, guy. I think for PhD students, this is mostly the responsibility of the supervisor to tap them on their back and say, yes, you have finished. But also, if you have writing groups, then your co-writers might help you understand that, yes, this is done, now you have finished. But here again, and I go back to the spirit of collectivity, it's good when you write something to have what we call a critical friend, a reader who will read your work and give you his or her ideas about what it is that you have done. So don't, although writing as a process is something that we do as individuals, the wider ambience of writing should be shared, I think, and collective. So opening up the process of writing to others, I think, is a very important thing.
And the idea of a writing retreat, a week with some friends, does not have to be that expensive. You can arrange it in the house with 3 friends and try to visit each other or stay in one house for 1 week. And you don't have to rent houses elsewhere. So it might be, this might be a place where people could meet up and say, let's arrange who is in need of a writing retreat in the last week of May, and then see who wants. You can do it online also. It is possible. I've been reading, I'm trying to read very fast all the wonderful examples that we got in the margin. One of the themes that really returns is that happiness comes with the flow. When the feeling is now I'm there, I can continue. It feels like that you're no longer, it seems to me the images have something to do with no longer being totally on your own and in control, but being caught by the flow, feeling that there's something bigger than you. I read with one of you, sorry for not mentioning names in doing justice to the beautiful metaphors, that feeling that you participate in the creation of sentences that are bigger than you, and that you somehow feel that you are part of a tradition or a movement, or inventing that those connections is a feeling that is not only about individual success, performance, being great, being clever, being on top of things, but it has something that has really to do with humility, accepting what comes and then turn it into sentences.
Yes, there was, I take it with order, there was a nice comment on deadlines. I totally agree about how paralyzing deadlines can be. And there are two options here. Decide what type of person you are. If I am asked to write under the pressure of deadline, that's over. I can't do anything under the deadline pressure. I look at my daughter, she only writes lastminute.girl.com. That's when she writes, when there is no more space or time not to write. So just decide what type of person you are and then plan in advance. Say, okay, I will write now for a chapter that is due in 2 months, because if the end of the month comes, I know I won't be able to write it then. Or you can say, oh, I still have 2 months, let's do something else. Okay, so that's my advice. Decide what kind of person you are. And there is another comment just close to it about the rewriting process. Somebody wrote that when I rewrite and then I lose faith in what I have written, the argument, whether I contribute something. I totally agree. You don't know how many times I have had this experience. Only last year, I was writing a paper about refugee women in the borderlands. And because this field has not been my field, I was thinking, what am I doing here? I'm writing, but is there anything new in what I'm writing? So what I decided to do was to send it to a journal. I sent it to Gender, Place and Culture, actually, which is a journal I love. And then I said, I will be prepared for a rejection. If they think what I have written is not original, they will tell me, okay? And I'm ready to cry and accept it. And it actually worked. Of course, the paper got 2 rounds of huge revisions, and I am indebted to the reviewers for their nice contribution. But in the end, the readers understood the originality that I could not see, and they helped me take it out. So perhaps if you're not brave enough to send it to a journal, that's again where your critical friend reader is there. Just send it to people and say, does this make sense? Do you think there is anything there? So open it up to your community. That's my advice about it. I stop because we have more comments and I will read more.
Yes, it is. One of the comments that I read is how to deal with feedback. You hear your advisor or the peer reviewers of a journal, they give you feedback, and then you think, how can I work with it? That is always. So first spend 24 hours wanting to kill them and think they don't understand at all what I want. People are too stupid and it's not fair and it is personal, and allow you all the emotions, allow them, and then suddenly you feel that you cannot keep up those emotions. Agliki, I know that you think like this about feedback, but don't laugh. no, I mean, allow yourself some unfair, harsh judgment on people who dare to give you feedback, but then try to move on. It's very comforting in the first day or week if it's really terrible, but then in the end you will probably think, wow, I can get better via this person who apparently hates me. So then you turn it into something that you're your own, and you work with it. So allow the emotions of total dejection when you are rejected, but that's not everything. There's always a day after when it's no longer really important. I mean, my life started with my PhD was not yet finished. I dared to write an article, and that was rejected by, in the early days of women's history, it was called then, in the Netherlands, and all people I knew were in the journal that they had founded about a yearbook for women's history, and they all thought it should not be published. So everyone I knew in the Friend, all my colleagues, the other feminist historians said, Berteke, this is not yet clever enough. You should refrain from this difficult topic. I haven't published it, so it ended in disaster. That can be the case. And it was tough, but at a certain moment I couldn't keep up the hate. I mean, what do I mean, let them think this, I'll do my own thing, and I'll try other journals, and success is the best revenge, if you want to frame it like this. But you can also say, in the end, we are all in it together. And also, yeah, feedback is a compliment. People have read you and they have thought, what can I do to make this text better? So that element is always there as well. There is a thing that we have not yet discussed, and as far as I see, I didn't see it in the chat either. We are in a field where most articles are authored by one person. It's a tradition. So, but Maria, you must correct me. You did lots of exciting co-authoring work. There are, of course, disciplines, fields, social sciences, when statistics come on, and you see a list of 12 authors, and then you have to be a real expert to know who really wrote it, the second from the beginning or something like. Try co-authoring. I have co-authored 2 books, and it is really fun. It is, you are in it together. You correct each other. It is not so lonely, and it is miraculous. But even so, the book I did on the colonial imperial context of Dutch feminism in the late 19th century was published in English. Every sentence in it, I still know whether I or my co-author was the first author. And we have probably changed words in each other's sentences all the time, in most of the sentences, but it is really a miraculous experience. So if you have a friend, a colleague you trust, propose to co-author an article or a book proposal. It is fun, and it helps you to diversify your writing. So sometimes you're writing for your own, and sometimes you're writing for someone who is waiting for you to send the draft.
I don't know whether we want to have questions from the participants, because I know there are all these comments about the moments, but maybe there are questions as well.
Absolutely. I was just going to say thank you, Maria. So everyone who has any questions, you can either chat it on the chat box, or if you are willing, you can raise your hand from Zoom, and you can use your own voice as well, whatever you prefer.
Great. Good.
While waiting, maybe I can ask Berteke, I'm really interested in the last point that you said. I'm always finding it hard to imagine like how you can write with another person, because there will always be some different ways of seeing things, theoretically, you know, interest wise, or, you know, writing style. Maybe while waiting for the question, you can tell about it a bit.
Okay, yeah, I mean,
Maria?
there is no standard rule about it. And you will find out that there are some people that writing with them is so much fun and goes without even thinking. I remember some years ago, we were 4 women colleagues, and we decided to do a project on derive, on psychogeography. And we sat one afternoon, like today, a sunny afternoon here in London, eating strawberries and drinking wine. And the paper, the chapter actually wrote itself. It was so easy. But I also have experiences with other co-writers where it was a struggle, because sometimes you divide tasks and you say, I will write this and you will write that. And one person manages to do their, you know, lot and the other doesn't. So finding a co-writer is also not easy, but if you do find them, then it can be so rewarding and so much fun.
Thank you very much.
And stop immediately.
Yes, Mariska,
When
you.
it doesn't work.
Sorry,
When it
but
doesn't work, stop immediately is my advice. Get out when it's not fun.
Yes.
well, that's really useful. Thank you very much. Mariska, you have, I hope I say your name right. You have your hands. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Dimit, if I pronounce your name correctly as well. So thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts, and also especially thanks to Maria and Berteke, if I may, for sharing your thoughts and your writing processes. I just had a very maybe practical question, but I've come across the advice to write every day to build a daily habit. But what I struggle with is then sort of the what I should write about, because sometimes the advice is, yeah, you can write anything, indeed a letter to your mom. But for me, I mean, that doesn't really help me. But when I want to write something, okay, this needs to be content oriented towards my PhD, then it already blocks me. So I wonder if you have a bit more specific advice or experiences on this regard, what helped you in building this daily habit. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if it doesn't help you, then write to your mother by all means. I don't want her not to receive letters, but I mean, if it doesn't help you for your PhD, then try to find ways to do something on your, then you really have to practice writing about what you find difficult. And this relates to Adriana's question about avoidance, procrastination of writing. Adriana, I don't see you, but you put it in the, think of different forms. Think of what would, do an interview with yourself about your PhD. What is the theory that you want to use? You write that down as if you are a journalist, and then you write the answer. Or write a description in this period, as if someone is writing about you before you get a job. In those last years, she has been writing about, and then you do what you, so as if it's someone else looking at you. Try to find forms that you know will not end up in the book like this, but that deal with your book or with your dissertation or the article that you're struggling with. Would that be a form of help?
Yeah, and I also have days where I wake up full of ideas, and I want to write. Again, check your time. Are you a morning writer or a night writer? I can only write in the morning since I was a little girl. I know people who only write at night. Okay, and here again, the contrast is with my daughter, you know. So if you wake up or it's towards, you know, midnight and you have this inside, just start writing something which can be creative, whether it is about your PhD or a paper or a chapter. If it is one of those crooked days, and there are so many crooked days when all you want to do is not to write, I would go back to Berteke's discipline. What I do when I have these crooked days is that I find to read something beautiful. And by reading, I start writing comments, ideas, questions. And I can do it whether I read a real book or I read online. And then when I start responding to the writing of others, I see that my writing starts rolling. And even if I haven't written anything which relates to my own research or project or proposal or anything, I have still written something. So I have kept to this discipline. So yes, one idea when you are blocked with writing is go back to reading. That's my advice.
And then there comes Shireen's question. When I want to write something and start reading for it, then I feel overwhelmed and it leaves me clueless. How would I deal with this? And I think responding to what you read is the trick here. So if you read a lot, just think, start with saying, this is fantastic because, or how can this author write this? Because it's clearly stupid or it contradicts. Write something responding to what you read. And allow yourself it to be in a very rough format, but as Maria says, that will not stick. The sentences will turn into something of yourself.
Yes, and overwhelming is definitely an issue, particularly when we go online now and all this information is pouring upon us. How can we deal with it? I have two pieces of advice for it. The first one is follow your guts. If you start reading something and you don't like it, just leave it. Okay, I'll tell you a little secret here. I never liked Judith Butler. Not of her ideas, I love her ideas, but I couldn't just connect with her when I was reading her. What's the end of story? I have never really seriously engaged with her work. I said, you know something, I'm going to die if I finish this book, so let it be. And that would apply to other people with other authors, of course. The second is that I have my club of favorite authors. So when I'm looking into an area, I take, for example, migration, which is my recent project. And I mentioned migration because that was not my field. So when I started trying to write about it, I was overwhelmed by information that I could not even process. So what I did, I went to my favorite authors and wrote their work. Trinh Minh Ha, for example. I had read Trinh Minh Ha for other kind of themes. I had never realized how importantly she had written about migration. So I followed her work, and also I followed the authors that she was citing. And so I created my little club of authors that I liked what they wrote about what I wanted to learn about, and sort of restricted myself within it, because I knew that if I opened myself to the world of migration readings, that was my end. I was never going to make it. So that's another advice. Create your own networks of authors, of books. But while doing that, don't forget the post-colonial critique, okay? Try to go a bit outside, you know, the box of who we read. And even there, in the post-colonial critique, you will find authors that you love and authors that you can't bear. That's fine. That's part of the deal.
That's perfect. That's really helpful. Thank you to both. I can see Angeliki have her rise up.
I want to follow what Maria said about post-colonial critique. Right now, I'm writing a paper on the Greek situation, and a part of it is a critique, a post-colonial critique against well-established Greek academics here that follow Western American and British framework and so on. Sometimes I feel so anxious with this critique that I stop writing. I mean, how to write a critique against a well-established academic. This makes me feel very, very anxious. And some days I quit writing. How would you deal? I mean, what kind of advice would you have for this kind of feelings?
I have an advice, Angeliki, because I recently did a critique to one of my favorite authors of all times. Do you know how I did it? I put myself in the critique. So when I was criticizing the work of this author, I was also criticizing myself because I had been influenced by this author to an extreme extent. And it was very difficult for me to, as you say, to bring myself to the point of critique. But when I put myself and my previous work into the pool, so I was writing against myself, and that liberated me. When I put myself in the place of the person who is criticized, so if you're writing a post-colonial critique of Western influenced Greek approaches, you are one of them, whether you agree it or not. So put yourself into it as well. And then you will see, you will feel more liberated.
Thanks.
Wow. I never thought of it like this, but I really agree. And I think it has to do with something of being aware that writing is not only individual, about one individual who takes the outsider's role and writes about the rest, but it is about taking your role of privilege, being privileged and partial within networks, rhizomes, connections. And if you are aware of that, the flow will come. And it also, great, Maria. Thank you for asking, Angeliki.
If I may, thank you very much for all the advice. And I just have a question about the language. Do you have any advice on when you begin? I mean, when you are an ECR, I mean, I'm just talking of myself there, but when you are writing in another language that is not your language, I know that a lot of people say that the cost of entry into that new language is high, and so. I wanted to ask if you would have some advice if you wrote a lot of, and if you wrote a lot of things during your career in a language that is not your native language. Well, because I'm trying to write in English. I'm French. I obviously write a lot in French also, because I'm in a French-speaking context, but in Switzerland. But I would like also to, you know, I'm also trying to write in English and publish in English, and it's not always that easy. And even when sometimes I think that it is okay, etc., and then then I see that the language is still a problem. And whereas sometimes I have the impression that I get a better level writing rather than speaking in English, you know. So well, it's just yeah, a question on language. Thank you.
I would say bet on two horses. Keep writing in the language that you feel most comfortable. I mean, don't ever give that up. But there are career prospects that require it. And then you have to practice and read and talk and find friends who are really open and say, Berteke, you cannot say it like this in English. I mean, you need honest friends for this. And think that writing academic language is always a form of translation from what, of course I cannot say this, but your natural speech, and moving your story about something in the world to another field. So there's always a translation and an estrangement or alienation. You might also celebrate that. Sometimes it's easier to write something in a language that you don't have perfectly in your fingers, and that you could not, there are things that I could not write in Dutch about the Netherlands, but they are easier to say in English. That's sometimes easy, but it's also a new challenge, because I then think, why not?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a big issue, and I'm so glad you brought it. Of course, I have written always in English, and my mother tongue is Greek. But the thing is that because I did all my postgraduate studies here in London, it was easier for me to start writing in English. And actually, I had the opposite problem, because I never went back to Greece. When I was visiting a conference there and I could not express myself scientifically in Greek, it was horrible. It was so embarrassing. And I was finding myself writing down words or expressions to learn. And now that I have a lot of French-speaking colleagues, and recently they asked me to submit an article to to Art d'Education, and I foolishly accepted. That was the worst decision I have ever taken in my life. It took me half of my life to write this paper. It's being published now, never again. So I know exactly what you mean. Maybe I'm asking too much of myself to be able to write in English and French and Greek, although I know a wonderful PhD student that Berteke supervised, and she defended her thesis last week. And she wrote in how many languages, Berteke? 4 or 5? I mean, amazing. So if I have a piece of advice, is like Berteke said, if you have writing in English as one of your career targets, then start writing consistently. And my advice is, don't translate your thoughts. Try to write in English directly. Of course, then you will send your paper to be edited and proofread and corrected, but don't make the mistake of writing something in French and then having it translated. That's the best advice I can give you, because it's only when you write in a different language that you also think in this language, and you also enter the syntax and the grammar of this language, and that's, you know, if you're that's what you want to do, then yes, that's what I would advise.
Thank you very much.
Here we are with 60 people, and I think the vast majority was not born to speak English. And that's, I don't know, we're not going to count, but without English, we would not have had this session. And that is politics, and I think it is changing, that English is no longer accepted as the normal language, and that we all, especially in critical race and post-colonial and feminist studies, we are aware that this English preference is okay, has a political and an economic background, and that everyone who problematizes it and says there should also be stuff in other languages and we should not, you're part of changing that world a little bit. Just as this bringing together of early career people from all over the world, as far as I can see, it changes something. One of the people who had to leave early said, reading all those sentences about despair and about happiness of writing changed it for me. I don't feel so lonely anymore. Yes, you change the world by connecting in English. That means sharing support and sharing the energy that might change something a little bit. I hope it works like this. I hope that Agenda supports it in that. Become a member, please. A pain.
Oh, that's such a great last point. It's 7:30 now. Thank you very much for these really, really inspiring talks. And thank you, Berteke, for this last message. Yes, please do check our membership details, which I posted some time ago. So yeah, please do follow us on social media as well. And thank you everyone who contributed with their comments and questions.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thanks all.
Thank you. It was very inspiring to read it. Don't you think, Maria?
Yes, I loved it.
Yeah, it was particularly inspiring for us. All of your advice are very, very useful for us. So thank you.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Charlene, can you turn off the recording?
Yes, I'm doing it. Yeah.